The message blinked on my phone. The trip is OFF for you. I froze. By midday, the house was gone. Every trace of our life erased. No warning. No note. Just a phone, empty rooms, and the chilling realization that someone had stolen everything I thought I owned. And then a new message appeared. Check the drawer you never open. I hesitated. Should I risk looking, or is this the moment I lose everything for good? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. My wife sent a message. The trip is off for you. By midday, the house was gone. The message came in at 6:17 a.m. The trip is off for you. No explanation. No punctuation. Just those 6 words, cold, final, staring back at me from my wife's name on my phone. I reread it until the letters blurred. Outside, the generator coughed awake and died again. Dawn leaked through the curtains like a bad secret. I swung my legs off the bed, the tiles biting my feet, and called her. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. By midday, the house was gone. Not burned. Not broken into. Gone. The gate stood open like a mouth that had just finished swallowing. The living room echoed when I stepped inside. An empty, hollow sound that didn't belong to a place that had been alive 12 hours earlier. No couch. No television. No framed wedding photo above the console table. The dent in the wall from the day we moved in? Smoothed. Painted. Erased. I walked room to room, counting losses with a numb precision. Our bed gone. The blue curtains she loved. Gone. The kitchen shelves bare, as if we'd never argued over where the plate should go. Even the spare keys on the hook by the door were missing. The only thing left was the smell of lemon polish and the faint echo of laughter that didn't feel like mine anymore. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No apology. No clarification. Just the message. The trip is off for you. My chest tightened as the meaning began to settle. Slow and heavy. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't a threat. This was a verdict. Neighbors gathered at the fence, eyes wide, voices hushed. Someone asked if we were moving. Someone else said they'd seen a truck at dawn. Another swore my wife had been calm, smiling even, directing men as they carried out a life that used to be ours. I leaned against the doorframe, the wood cool against my back, and tried to remember the last thing she'd said to me in person. Tried to remember if I'd missed a warning. A look held too long. A silence that should have scared me. My phone buzzed again. Not from her. From an unknown number. You weren't supposed to see it this way, the message read. I stared at the empty house and felt the floor tilt beneath me. Whoever sent that message knew something. About the trip. About the timing. About why everything I owned had vanished before lunch. And as fear finally cut through the shock, one question burned louder than the rest. What could make a woman erase a marriage in a single morning, and make sure her husband was the only thing left behind? If you were in my place, would you chase the truth? Or walk away before it destroys what's left of you? Tell me what you'd do in the comments. Before that morning, before the message, before the empty rooms, my life had been painfully ordinary. That's the part people never believe. They want drama before the disaster. Cracks in the wall. Screaming matches. Affairs whispered over midnight calls. But the truth is quieter, and maybe that's what hurts the most. My wife, Amara, and I had been married for 8 years. 8 years of routines that didn't feel dangerous until they vanished. We lived in a modest duplex on a calm street where everyone knew everyone's business and pretended not to. I worked as a project coordinator for a logistics firm. Long hours, decent pay, constant pressure. Amara ran an interior decor business from home, transforming other people's houses into dreams while ours stayed comfortably imperfect. Every morning, she woke before me. I'd hear the soft clink of a spoon against a mug, the smell of ginger tea, sometimes humming, sometimes silence. She always left my cup on the counter, steam rising, even on days we were barely speaking. We weren't perfect, but we were stable. Or so I thought. The trip had been her idea. "Let's travel," she'd said one evening, curled up on the couch with her legs across mine. Just us. Somewhere quiet. Reset. Reset. That word should have warned me. She planned everything. Tickets, hotel, itinerary. All I had to do was take time off work and show up. I remember teasing her, calling her my personal travel agent. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Looking back now, that smile feels like a locked door. In the months leading up to the trip, something shifted. Nothing obvious. Just absence. She laughed less. Touched me less. When I talked about work, she listened, but her mind seemed somewhere else, as if she were mentally packing for a journey I wasn't invited to. I blamed stress, business pressure, life. I didn't ask the hard questions. Because when things seem fine, you don't want to be the one who breaks them open. There were other people in our orbit too, threads I didn't realize were tightening around us. Mrs. Adebayo, our neighbor, who watched everything from behind lace curtains and always asked too many questions. Kunal, Amara's younger brother, who had recently borrowed a large sum of money and avoided eye contact ever since. And Victor, my old friend from university, recently divorced, suddenly reappearing in our lives with unsolicited advice about marriage, finances, and knowing when to let go. At the time, none of them felt dangerous. Just background noise in a normal life. The night before the message, Amara barely spoke. She packed quietly, folded clothes with surgical precision. When I asked if something was wrong, she said, "We'll talk after the trip." After. I kissed her forehead before bed. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. That was the last moment that felt like a marriage. Now, standing in an empty house, those memories replayed like scenes from a film I'd misunderstood. I sat on the bare floor where our couch used to be, back against the wall, and tried to trace the moment everything went wrong. The unknown numbers message echoed in my head. You weren't supposed to see it this way. See what? The trip wasn't just canceled. It was a cover for something planned, coordinated, executed with precision. You don't erase a house in a morning unless you've been preparing for weeks, maybe months, which meant while I was living my ordinary life, someone else was preparing to remove me from it. And the most terrifying thought of all settled in my chest. What if the life I thought was normal had already ended? And I was the last one to know. Pause for a moment and think. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to realize later you never knew the full story? Hold that thought, because what I discovered next changed everything. I didn't leave the house that afternoon, not because there was anything left to guard, but because something inside me refused to move, as if stepping outside would make it official. Like once I crossed that gate, I'd be admitting my marriage had been packed into boxes and driven away without me. The sun crawled overhead. Heat pressed against the walls. Silence settled in layers. Then, at exactly 2:03 p.m., my phone rang. This time, it was Amara's name. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. "Hello," I said, too fast, too desperate. For 3 seconds, there was only breathing on the other end. Calm, controlled, familiar in the most unfamiliar way. Then she spoke. "You saw the house." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "Where are you? What is going on?" A pause. Not confusion. Calculation. "I told you the trip was off," she replied. I didn't say anything else would stay the same. Something in her tone, flat, almost rehearsed, sent a chill through me. "You emptied our home," I said. "You disappeared. Amara, talk to me." "I am talking to you," she said quietly. "I just can't explain everything yet." Yet. The word landed like a promise and a threat at the same time. "Why?" I asked. "What did I do?" Another pause. Longer this time. "You didn't do anything," she said. "That's the problem." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my reflection warped across the dark screen. My hands were shaking now. Not with anger, but with the growing realization that this wasn't impulsive. This was strategic. I tried calling back. It rang once, then diverted. Again. Blocked. Minutes later, a notification popped up from my bank app. Alert. Joint account balance updated. I opened it. 0 Nigerian nairas. Every naira gone. Rent savings. Emergency funds. The money set aside for the trip she had planned. My knees buckled. I sat hard on the floor, the air leaving my lungs in a sharp, humiliating rush. That's when I understood. The message that morning hadn't been cruel. It had been merciful. She wasn't canceling a vacation. She was canceling me. Another message came in, from the same unknown number as before. Check the drawer you never open. I froze. There was only one drawer like that, the narrow one beneath the bookshelf in the bedroom. The one filled with old receipts, tangled chargers, and things we'd agreed didn't matter enough to sort. I walked to the bedroom. Each step felt like trespassing in my own life. The drawer slid open with a soft scrape. Inside, beneath a stack of outdated insurance papers, was a manila envelope. My name was written on it. Inside were photocopies, property documents, power of attorney forms, my signature, or something that looked disturbingly like it. My head spun as I flipped through the pages. Dates jumped out at me. Transactions I didn't remember authorizing. Agreements I didn't recall discussing. Legal language dense enough to hide 1,000 sins. At the bottom of the envelope was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. I needed you cooperative, not aware. I'm sorry it came to this. No signature. But I knew her handwriting better than my own. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't revenge. This was a takeover. Someone had used my trust like a key and walked out with my life. And suddenly, one terrifying possibility rose above the rest. What if the trip wasn't for rest, but for escape? Right here, pause and think. If the person you trusted most had access to everything you owned, would you even know when they started using it against you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because what I uncovered next proved I wasn't the only one being played. I spent that night sitting on the bare floor, the envelope spread around me like evidence from a crime scene I didn't yet understand. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my signature. Smooth, confident, staring back at me from documents I had never knowingly signed. Or I heard Amara's voice in my head, calm and distant, saying, I needed you cooperative, not aware. By morning, shock had hardened into something else. Resolve. I showered at a neighbor's house, borrowed a shirt 2 sizes too big, and stepped outside with nothing but my phone, my wallet, and questions that refused to stay quiet. The first place I went was the bank. The manager, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a practiced smile, pulled up our joint account and frowned. These withdrawals were authorized, he said, digitally and in person. In person. I repeated. When? He turned the screen toward me. 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. 6 days ago. Each transaction had my name beside it. Each carried a signature that looked enough like mine to pass, but not enough to feel right. You didn't come alone, he added, flipping another page. Your wife was present. Of course she was. Amara had always said she preferred handling things together. I'd thought it was partnership. Now it felt like plausible deniability. I left the bank with a headache blooming behind my eyes and one cold certainty. Whatever Amara was doing, she'd started long before the message. The text wasn't the beginning. It was the final move. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You should stop asking questions. I stopped walking. People streamed past me on the street, carrying groceries, arguing on phones, living lives that still made sense. I typed back before fear could stop me. Who are you? The reply came instantly. Someone who knows why she left. My pulse thundered in my ears. Tell me, I typed. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then a location pin dropped onto my screen. A cafe. 10 minutes away. Against every instinct screaming at me to turn around, I followed it. The cafe was quiet. tucked between a pharmacy and a closed tailor shop. I scanned every face as I stepped inside, my shoulders tight, my hands damp. That's when I saw him. Victor. My old friend sat alone near the window, stirring coffee he hadn't touched. He looked up slowly like he'd been expecting me all along. "You look like hell," he said. I stood there stunned. "You sent the messages?" He sighed. I warned her this would be messy. That sentence hit harder than any insult. "You warned her." I whispered. Victor leaned back, eyes heavy with something that almost looked like guilt. "Sit down. You need to hear this before you do something stupid." I didn't sit. "You knew," I said. "You knew she was planning this." "I knew she was planning something," he replied carefully. "I didn't think she'd move this fast." My hands clenched at my sides. "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked away, jaw tightening. "Because she convinced me you already knew. That you'd agreed." Agreed. The word echoed painfully. "She said the trip was part of the transition," Victor continued. "That you'd sign the last documents there. Clean break. Quiet." My stomach dropped. The trip hadn't been canceled. I had been cut out of it. So what changed? I asked. Victor hesitated, then said the words that made my chest go cold. "She found out someone else was watching." "Who?" His eyes met mine, and for the first time since I walked in, the confidence cracked. "I think," he said slowly, "your wife isn't just leaving you." I leaned closer, my voice barely steady. "Then what is she doing?" Victor swallowed. "She's running from something she did, and from someone she thinks you'll lead straight to her." My phone vibrated in my pocket again. Another message. "If you keep digging, you'll lose more than your house." I looked up at Victor, fear and fury tangling in my chest. "How deep does this go?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, he said, "Deep enough that you're not the only victim." And in that moment, sitting in a cafe that suddenly felt too small, I realized this wasn't just a story about betrayal anymore. It was about exposure. And the closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous it became, for everyone involved. Let me ask you this. If uncovering the truth meant risking what little you had left, would you still keep going? Tell me honestly, because the next revelation shattered everything I thought I knew. Victor didn't finish his coffee. Neither did I. We left the cafe separately. His idea, not mine. He said we were being watched. Said Amara had learned how to move without making noise, and whoever she was afraid of had learned it too. "Give me an hour," he said quietly as we stood outside. "If you don't hear from me, don't come looking." That should have scared me enough to stop. It didn't. Because by then, fear had already done its worst. What replaced it was clarity. The sharp, dangerous kind that only comes when you realize your life has already been burned down. You stop worrying about sparks. An hour passed. Then two. By the third hour, my phone buzzed. But it wasn't Victor. It was a notification from my email. Subject: Notice of beneficial ownership change. I opened it with shaking fingers. A company name I recognized immediately appeared at the top of the page. Orem Ridge Properties. The real estate firm Amara had insisted we invest together in 2 years ago. She'd framed it as security. Passive income. Our future. According to the email, the company's controlling interest had been transferred to Amara Adeyemi. Sole beneficiary. Effective immediately. My name appeared once in the document, under a single sentence that made my vision blur. Former partner relinquished rights. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because something inside me finally snapped into place. The documents in the drawer. The drained accounts. The rushed disappearance. This wasn't panic. This was completion. I scrolled. Attached to the email was a PDF, court-stamped, official, final. A divorce filing. Filed 3 days ago. Signed on my behalf. The room tilted. My phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the pavement. I bent over, gasping, my lungs burning like I'd been underwater too long. 3 days ago, Amara had kissed me goodnight. 3 days ago, she'd asked if I wanted tea. 3 days ago, she'd still been my wife, at least in my mind. I picked up the phone again, my fingers moving on instinct. I called her. This time, she answered. I was wondering how long it would take, she said. You forged my signature, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You stole everything. No, she corrected gently. I reclaimed what I built. What about me? I demanded. What was I doing all these years? She sighed, like a teacher tired of explaining a lesson twice. You were useful, she said. Until you weren't. The words cut deep, but what came next destroyed me. You want to know the truth? She continued. The real reason the trip was off for you? I said nothing. She lowered her voice. Because if you'd come, you would have been arrested. The world went silent. What? I whispered. She laughed softly, not cruelly but with relief. There's an investigation, she said. Financial fraud. Laundering. Paper trails. Someone needed a fall guy. My knees gave out. I leaned against a wall, barely standing. And you chose me, I said. I chose survival, she replied. You were already connected. Accounts. Access. Authority. All I did was make it believable. I felt sick. Victor's words came rushing back. She's running from something she did. You framed me, I said. Yes, she answered. And if you're smart, you'll disappear quietly and let it work. Why tell me this? I asked. There was a pause. Because part of me still cared, she said. And because if you talk, we both burn. The line went dead. I stood there shaking as the full weight of it crashed over me. The betrayal wasn't emotional. It was criminal. My wife hadn't just erased our marriage. She had designed my downfall. And suddenly, the unknown messages made sense. Someone else was watching. Someone who knew the truth. Someone who didn't want me silenced or sacrificed. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Victor. I found the missing piece. She lied to both of us. Meet me now. And listen carefully, because you're not the fall guy anymore. My heart pounded. For the first time since the message that morning, something new cut through the fear. Hope. Let me ask you this, if you discovered the person who destroyed your life was also hiding something far worse, would you expose them, even if it meant walking straight into danger? Tell me your thoughts below. Victor chose the worst possible place to meet. A half-built office complex on the edge of town. Concrete pillars exposed like broken bones, no security lights, no guards. The kind of place where sounds travel too far and help never comes fast enough. By the time I arrived, night had swallowed the sky. Victor stood under a flickering bulb powered by a generator, his face drawn tight, eyes darting. The man who'd once laughed through exams and weddings now looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. You shouldn't have come alone, he said. I don't have anyone else, I replied. That truth sat heavily between us. He handed me a flash drive. Everything is here. Transactions. Shell accounts. Properties registered under false identities. I stared at it. Whose identities? Victor hesitated. Then he said it. Yours. The ground dropped out from under me. She used your name for more than just signatures, he continued. She built an entire paper persona around you. Loans. Transfers. Even offshore accounts. I felt dizzy. So even if I prove I didn't sign, you'll still look guilty, he finished. At least at first. My phone buzzed again, vibrating violently in my hand. Unknown number. They're moving sooner than expected. I showed Victor. His face drained of color. She knows you're close. As if summoned by the thought, headlights flared at the far end of the site. Then another. Then another. 3 cars rolled in slowly, deliberately, engines idling like predators circling. Victor grabbed my arm. We need to leave. Now. We didn't make it 10 steps. A voice cut through the darkness. Calm. Female. Running already? Amara stepped into the light. She wore black, simple, elegant, untouchable. Two men flanked her, their presence heavy with threat. She didn't look angry. She looked finished. "You were warned," she said, eyes locked on me. "Both of you." Victor stepped forward. "You used him. You were supposed to walk away clean." "I am walking away clean," she replied. "You're the complication." She nodded once. One of the men lunged. The blow came fast, a sharp crack behind my ear. I fell hard, the world exploding into white noise. I tasted blood. Somewhere nearby, Victor shouted my name. Then another sound. A gunshot. Everything froze. When my vision cleared, Victor was on the ground. Not moving. Amara stared at him. Not shocked, not panicked. Just resigned. "I told you not to dig," she said softly. I crawled toward Victor, my hands slick, my heart screaming. "Get up," I whispered. "Please." He didn't. The men stepped back. Amara turned away, already done. "By morning," she said over her shoulder, "the story will be simple. He panicked. Tried to blackmail me. You were involved." She paused. "Disappear," she added, "or prison will be kinder than what follows." The cars drove off. Silence crashed down. I knelt there, shaking, blood on my hands that wasn't mine, staring at the man who'd tried, too late, to tell me the truth. Everything was gone now. My home. My marriage. My name. And the only person who could clear me lay lifeless on cold concrete. I screamed until my throat burned, but the building swallowed the sound. That night, sitting alone beside Victor's body until dawn threatened the sky, I understood something terrible. Amara hadn't just destroyed my life. She had made sure I had nothing left to lose. And that was exactly how she wanted me. Right now, ask yourself, if you were stripped of your past, your safety, and your identity, would you still believe redemption was possible? Hold that question because the answer comes next. Dawn didn't feel like mercy. It felt like exposure. The first light crept across the concrete, pale and unforgiving, revealing what the night had tried to hide. Victor's stillness, the dark stain spreading beneath him, the truth that no amount of screaming could undo. I sat there until my legs went numb. Until birds began to argue in the distance like the world hadn't just ended. When I finally stood, my body moved on instinct alone. I wiped my hands on my trousers, picked up the flash drive Victor had pressed into my palm, slipped it into my pocket like it was the last proof that I wasn't insane, that this nightmare had a shape, a cause, an enemy. I didn't call the police. Not because I didn't want justice, but because I finally understood the game. Amara had built a maze where every straight path led back to me. Statements, paperwork, timelines. She'd made sure the system would see what she wanted it to see. A guilty man panicking. A loyal wife betrayed. A dead accomplice. I walked away from the site just as the city began to wake. Somewhere behind me, sirens wailed. Distant, inevitable. I kept my head down and merged into the morning crowd, a ghost wearing my own face. By mid-morning, I was sitting in the back of a roadside cybercafe, headphones on, staring at lines of data scrolling past my eyes. The flash drive worked. What I saw made my stomach tighten, not with fear this time, but with clarity. Victor hadn't been wrong. Amara's operation was massive, layered, carefully insulated. But it wasn't perfect. She'd been brilliant, but not patient. She'd reused vendors, recycled shell companies, left faint fingerprints in places she assumed no one would look. And then I saw it. A transaction time-stamped 6 minutes after Victor was shot. A transfer routed through a private escrow account, one that could only be accessed if a contingency had been triggered. A death. My hands stilled over the keyboard. She hadn't planned for Victor to die. She'd planned for me to. The realization hit like ice water. The trip. The documents. The framing. I was never supposed to be alive to question any of it, which meant something had gone wrong. And if something had gone wrong once, it could again. I leaned back, heart pounding, And for the first time since that morning message, I felt it, not hope but leverage. I wasn't chasing Amara anymore. I was ahead of her. I copied the files, encrypted them, uploaded fragments to secure cloud storage under aliases that didn't trace back to me. I sent one small packet, just enough to be dangerous, to an investigative journalist known for not taking hush money. No names, no accusations, just numbers, patterns, questions. Then I did something else, something quiet, something personal. I opened my notes app and wrote a single sentence. She needed me cooperative, not aware. I choose aware. I remembered our early days then. How Amara used to say knowledge was power. How she hated surprises unless she'd planned them herself. I smiled for the first time in days. By evening, my phone buzzed. A new message. From Amara. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, calm settling over me like armor. She knew. She didn't know how much, but she knew enough. And for the first time, the fear had shifted sides. I typed back slowly. You should have finished the job. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. No reply came. I stood, stepped out into the cooling air, and looked up at the darkening sky. I was still hunted. Still homeless. Still legally vulnerable. But I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. Because the truth hadn't died with Victor. It had chosen me. Let me ask you this. Have you ever reached a moment where you realized your greatest betrayal also revealed your greatest strength? If so, share it. Because the final confrontation is coming. The meeting place was her idea. The airport hotel. Neutral ground. Cameras everywhere. Crowds moving constantly. Arrivals, departures, people with places to be and futures still intact. Amara had always liked locations where no one could linger long enough to ask questions. She texted the room number. The time. 1 hour. Come alone. I smiled at that. By the time I reached the hotel, the story was already moving without us. The journalist replied to my encrypted message with a single word. Received. Another alert followed. This one from my email. A regulatory inquiry notice. Quiet. Preliminary. But real. Someone had started pulling threads. I took the elevator up, my reflection staring back at me from the mirrored walls. Thinner, older, steadier. The man who stepped out on the 7th floor wasn't the same one who'd read that message at 6:17 a.m. I knocked once. The door opened almost immediately. Amara stood there composed as ever, dressed in cream and gold, hair pulled back neatly. If anyone glanced inside, they'd see nothing more than a couple about to talk things through. She stepped aside. You look terrible. You look nervous, I replied. Her jaw tightened just enough to confirm it. The room smelled faintly of citrus and expensive soap. A single suitcase lay open on the bed. Passport visible. Departure imminent. You shouldn't have involved outsiders, she said, folding her arms. This could have ended quietly. Quietly for who? I asked. Me in prison? Or in the ground? Her eyes flickered. Not denial. You were never meant to die, she said. But I was acceptable if I did, I replied. Silence stretched between us. Then she sighed. You don't understand the pressure I was under. I laughed softly. You framed your husband, drained his accounts, erased his home, and had a man killed. Help me understand. Her voice sharpened. Victor wasn't supposed to confront me. And I wasn't supposed to live long enough to connect the dots, I said. But here we are. I reached into my pocket and placed my phone on the table between us. Screen facing up. A countdown timer ticked silently. What's that? She asked. Insurance, I said. Encrypted files. They release in stages if I don't check in. She took a step back. You're bluffing. I tapped the phone. An email preview flashed across the screen. Her shell companies listed in neat rows. Transaction IDs highlighted. Her breath caught. You always underestimated one thing, I said. You thought I was passive because I trusted you. You were passive, she snapped. Trust isn't weakness, I said calmly. It's leverage if you survive long enough to use it. Her phone rang. She answered without taking her eyes off me. Yes. A pause. Her face drained. She lowered the phone slowly. There are auditors downstairs. And reporters outside, I added. Someone tipped them about a high-profile departure. She looked at the suitcase. At the door. At me. You did this, she whispered. I finished it, I said. You started the story. I made sure it ended truthfully. Tears welled in her eyes. Not for me, not for Victor, but for the collapse of a plan she'd believed flawless. You won't walk away clean, I continued. But neither will I, at least not today. Sirens wailed faintly below. Footsteps hurried in the hallway. Amara sank onto the edge of the bed, the weight of inevitability finally settling on her shoulders. I loved you, she said quietly. I believed her. And that made it hurt. But it didn't change the truth. Love without integrity is just strategy, I replied. A knock thundered at the door. I stepped back, hands visible. When the door opened and voices filled the room, I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been knotted since dawn. This wasn't revenge. It was release. If you were standing where I stood, watching the person who broke you finally face the truth, would you feel victory or grief? Tell me what you think, because the ending isn't what you expect. 3 months later, I stood in a place that didn't echo. That was how I knew I was healing. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, 1 window that caught the afternoon sun just right, 1 table that wobbled if you leaned on it too hard. But it was mine. No joint documents. No shared passwords. No signatures I didn't recognize. Mine. The investigation hadn't been clean or quick. It never is. There were weeks when my name still trended in whispers, when suspicion clung to me like dust you can't brush off. I answered questions. Repeated timelines. Sat under fluorescent lights while strangers decided whether I looked like a criminal or a casualty. The evidence did what truth always does. Slow work, sharp results. The forged signatures were exposed. The shell companies unraveled. The contingency transfer after Victor's death became the crack that split everything open. Amara didn't fight it in the end. Her lawyers negotiated. Charges stacked. Deals were offered and refused. The woman who once controlled every outcome learned, painfully, what it meant to lose control of the narrative. I attended the hearing on the final day. Not out of spite, but for closure. She didn't look at me when the verdict was read. I didn't need her to. Some endings don't require eye contact to be final. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered like birds waiting for scraps. I said nothing. I'd learned that silence, used correctly, can be its own kind of power. Victor's sister found me later. She hugged me without asking permission. Thank you for not letting him disappear, she said. That mattered more than any headline. The journalist published the story weeks later, not as a scandal, but as a warning. About trust. About systems. About how easily love can be weaponized when no one's paying attention. My name appeared once. Cleared. I started over quietly. New job. Different field. Fewer hours. More air in my lungs. I relearned what peace felt like. Not the fragile kind built on denial, but the sturdy kind that comes from knowing exactly where you stand. Some nights, I still wake up at 6:17 a.m. Muscle memory. But the phone is silent now. No messages. No threats. No cancellations disguised as mercy. Just mourning. On my wall hangs a single sentence, framed simply. Awareness is survival. I don't hate Amara. That surprised me most. What I feel instead is distance, the kind that lets you see a person clearly at last without wanting to follow them anywhere. I lost a marriage. I lost a home. I lost a friend. But I kept my life. And in the end, that was the victory she never planned for. Before you go, let me ask you something honestly. If the person you trusted most turned out to be your greatest test, would you let it break you? Or would you let it rebuild you stronger? Share your thoughts in the comments. Someone reading them might need that reminder more than you know. And if you stayed to the end, thank you. Sometimes survival stories aren't about how we fall, but about how we choose to stand back up.